Good morning. Welcome to the Stylo News Intelligence Update for July 9th, 2026. Today, we're bringing you a fact-based, open-source explainer focusing on the East Asian theater, and specifically the rapidly shifting dynamics in North Korea. We're here to lay out the data for you calmly and neutrally, giving you a clear picture of the facts on the ground without the unnecessary alarm.
This early morning briefing is proudly brought to you by ProWave AI. They're the developers behind Stylo Intel Ops and the commercial Stylo News platform, delivering AI-powered open-source intelligence right when you need it.
Over the next few minutes, we'll walk you through our executive assessment, map out key regional events, and look at shifting international perspectives. From there, we'll dive into the Russia connection, evaluate current open-source sentiment, and finally, forecast what you should look out for next.
Let's get right into our executive assessment with the bottom line up front.
When looking at the most critical intelligence requirements for the Korean Peninsula over the last 2 weeks, there's really one big question on everyone's mind. Is North Korea preparing for a major imminent attack on the South? Let's take a look at what the data actually tells us.
We currently assess with medium confidence that a full-scale immediate invasion is unlikely. We just aren't seeing those classic warning signs of a general offensive. Things like mass reserve call-ups or massive logistical surges. However, the risk of a limited provocation is definitely elevated. Plus, there's a high likelihood that Pyongyang will continue supporting Russian strategic goals alongside a persistent high-level threat of missile tests, cyber operations, and coercive actions aimed at U.S. and allied forces.
Now, to really grasp this operational environment, we need to look at the geographical context and recent theater operations.
Geography is absolutely crucial here. This map highlights the strategic bottlenecks and critical focal points across the peninsula. In the south, you'll see major U.S. force concentrations at Camp Humphreys and Osan Air Base. Looking north, note the key naval facilities at Nampo on the west coast and Wonsan and the Sinpo South Shipyard on the east. We also need to keep a very close eye on the KDs, the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone, which has really become a highly contested airspace for regional posturing.
It's fascinating to trace how this situation escalated through the back half of June. On the 19th, the G7 summit discussed a phased denuclearization strategy. Just 4 days later, North Korea countered by commissioning the Choe-Hon, a brand new 5,000-ton nuclear-capable destroyer. By the 26th, South Korea announced a massive expansion of its own drone warfare capabilities. Then, on the 29th, a joint Sino-Russian strategic air patrol entered that Kyaz's airspace we just mentioned, triggering fighter scrambles. And capping it off on June 30th, open-source intelligence confirmed Kim Jong-un officially removed the goal of peaceful reunification from the North Korean constitution. It's a rapid, undeniable succession of escalatory signals.
So, what does this all mean for shifting strategic postures?
What we're seeing is a deep contrast in regional strategies. On one hand, the North Korean leadership is undergoing a serious ideological hardening. They're prioritizing a sovereign nuclear deterrence, actively shifting from a coastal defense force to a nuclear-armed navy, and importantly, they are institutionalizing a decentralized nuclear command. By abandoning reunification, they are essentially treating the South as a strictly hostile foreign state. On the other hand, the U.S.-South Korea alliance is maintaining its phased denuclearization strategy while quietly strengthening trilateral defense interoperability with Japan and rapidly expanding their own immediate military readiness.
In direct response to the North's advancements, South Korea is dramatically altering its tactical posture. They've committed to producing 60,000 military drones and training 500,000 drone operators by 2029. To put that into perspective, it's a massive pivot toward advanced unmanned tactical deterrence designed specifically to offset traditional artillery and rocket threats from Pyongyang.
This brings us to a major piece of the puzzle, the evolving alliances and missile modernization, tied directly to the Russia connection.
Pyongyang's military capabilities aren't evolving in a vacuum. We're actively tracking a newly formalized strategic defense pact between North Korea and Russia. In fact, field reports show over 100 North Korean KN-23 and KN-24 ballistic missiles have already been deployed to the Ukraine theater. What's absolutely vital from an East Asian security perspective is that this live combat testing has reportedly allowed Russian engineers to help shrink those weapons' accuracy margins from a full kilometer down to just 1 to 5 meters. In exchange, Pyongyang gets vital political cover, energy, and technical backing. It's a highly pragmatic shift away from their traditional exclusive reliance on China, and it is definitely altering the balance of power in the region.
Let's move on to how we verify this through open-source intelligence and sentiment analysis.
Our assessments are rigorously cross-checked against international media and broad sentiment analysis. If you look at outlets like Reuters or the Japan Times, you'll see extensive, factual coverage of these naval tests and border tensions. Over on social media, measurable public sentiment definitely leans towards skepticism and heightened anxiety over the upgraded rocket tests. But interestingly, when you look at the academic and defense communities, the tone is much more clinical. They're focusing on long-term deterrence implications rather than predicting a sudden, unprovoked war. So the broad consensus across the board acknowledges a severe, evolving military threat, but firmly stops short of expecting an imminent ground invasion. Finally, let's look at our intelligence projections and what actions to anticipate. Based on all this data, what should we be watching out for? Well, the most probable near-term scenario involves North Korea exploiting current regional distractions to conduct more coercive missile tests. We also see a high probability of localized cyber operations, GPS jamming along the border, or even isolated maritime incidents. We're keeping a very close watch for further integration of nuclear weapons into their naval forces, specifically any reports of planned 10,000-ton strategic cruisers. And lastly, we need to monitor for coordinated multi-axis pressure from both China and Russia, a strategy clearly designed to stretch Allied intelligence and surveillance assets thin across the region.
This explainer has given you a structured overview of the current strategic environment. But to really explore these dynamics in depth and hear our expanded regional analysis of the past 2 weeks, we highly recommend queuing up today's full Stylo News Intel Update Morning podcast. It's available right now on your favorite channel, or you can just click the link provided in this post.
Thank you so much for joining us for this briefing. We hope we've kept you informed calmly and accurately. Before you go, we want to leave you with one final, critical thought to ponder. Are global alliances shifting faster than traditional military deterrence can adapt? Think about it. And to continue tracking this rapidly evolving situation, be sure to subscribe at stylonews.com. Have a great day.